Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Reckless Paradise podcast. I am your host, Dystro, and tonight's episode is another Throwback Thursday, if you want to call it that, but it is another best of series on the channel. And what kind of best of that we should do, I know, English, right? Then the wrestling pay per view itself in your house. In your house was a it was a concept of like where a lucky fan or a lucky person would get a a house at their like it's a house that they would have themselves, and it's actually one of those things where it was just like, okay, cool, like they have their own house, but then they have another house on top of that. But the original concept of the In Your House series was that in the months when the promotion was not holding any of the five major pay-per-views, which was Mania, SummerSlam, King of the Ring, Royal Rumble, or Survivor Series, it would offer a 2-hour pay-per-view for a lower price, which I think was like 1995 or something like that. The In Your House was established in response to a move by competitor WCW to increase its annual pay-per-view events. The In Your House branding was retired following February 1999's St. Valentine's Day Massacre In Your House event, as the company moved to install permanent names for each of its monthly pay-per-views, which began with Backlash. After 21 years in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, WWE revived In Your House for NXT in 2020, and was subsequently held annually in June until its final event in 2022. The 2021-2020 events were held under the NXT TakeOver series, but after TakeOver's discontinuation in late 2021, the final In Your House was a standalone event for NXT. So we have the first one in May 4th or May 14th of 95, and then we have July 23rd, 95, and then we have September 24th, October 22nd, and then December 17th of 95. That rounds out 95 right there, which was a horrible year for WWF at that time. We had In Your House 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 in 96. Then we had In Your House 13, 14, 15, 16, Ground Zero, Bad Blood, double D Bad Blood, Degeneration X In Your House in 97, No Way Out of Texas, which will be No Way Out, Unforgiven, Over the Edge, Fully Loaded, Breakdown, Judgment Day, Rock Bottom, St. Valentine's Day Massacre, and then the NXT TakeOver events in their respective orders. So, I thought it'd be an actual cool thing to see, like, what was the best of, like, pay-per-views, but I guess the best of matches, if you want to call it that, too. So, Sportster, the website Sportster, ranked the top 10 In Your House pay-per-view main events ranked from worst to best. So the most obvious one was the In Your House 21, which is Unforgiven, 1998, which was Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Dude Love, which that's an all-time classic match for its own sanity here. In Your House 13, Final Four, which was Bret Hart, Undertaker, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Vader, which was an actual really good match too. In Your House 11, Buried Alive in 96, Taker versus Mankind, which that's an all-time classic too. In Your House 14, Revenge of the Taker, which has Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin from after their classic at WrestleMania 13. They had a rematch at In Your House, Revenge of the Taker, which I always put WrestleMania 13 as like their best match of all time. Bret Hart versus the British Bulldog at In Your House 5, Seasoned Beatings, which that actually kind of saved the show. for that time period. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Dude Love and In Your House 22, which is labeled Over the Edge, which that was a good one. In Your House 7, Good Friends, Better Enemies. Shawn Michaels versus Diesel, which was like the best like Diesel Shawn Michaels match of all time. The one of the all-time favorite 10-man tags that I know, Heart Foundation versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, Gold Dust, Ken Shamrock, and Legion of Doom from In Your House 16, Canadian Stampede, which mainly saved the show. I mean, that whole card was actually a really good card too, from top to bottom. So I thought it was really, really good. Shawn Michaels versus Mankind, In Your House 10, Mind Games, which another kind of classic one. And then the number one match of all time was Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker from In Your House 18, Bad Blood, which was the Hell in a Cell match, the very first one. So going with that, there was the In Your House DVD that happened, a few years ago. And some of these matches were taken from various In Your Houses and all that stuff. So we have Bret Hart versus Hakushi from the very first In Your House. And then, I guess from one of the In Your Houses. Jeff Jarrett versus Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental Championship, which that actually sounds sick. Bret Hart versus British Bulldog from Season Beatings, 95, like I said. Stone Cold versus Hunter Hearst Helmsley from In Your House Buried Alive in 96. The Four Corners match for the vacant WWE Championship from In Your House Final Four. The 10-man tag from Canadian Stampede, like I said. A non-sanctioned 8-man tag with Austin, Owen Hart, Cactus Jack, and Chainsaw Charlie, Terry Funk, versus Triple H, New Age Outlaws, and Savio Vega from No Way Out in Texas, In Your House, 98. Austin and Taker versus Mankind and Kane from Fully Loaded In Your House for the tag team titles, which actually sounds pretty sick. Ken Shamrock versus Mankind for the Intercontinental Championship at Judgment Day In Your House in 98. The infamous Last Man Standing match between Rock and Mankind at St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And that what ends like the DVD there, or the Blu-ray, whatever. But yeah, it was kind of like one of those things where it was like at the best of times, worst of times, So I kind of want to try to go over like however many buy rates they had for each one. I don't really know if there's going to be a whole bunch for it because, it was like one of those things where it's just, it's, not a lot of people really bought it. But the very first one was 332,000 pay-per-view buys, which is not bad for 95, which is not bad at all. And then for the second one was 280,000. It's a huge kind of dip, but that's okay. In Your House 3 was 160,000. Holy shit, that's not good at all. The main event was that it was Two Dudes with Attitude versus Yoko and Owen Hart. Because it was the WWF Championship, the Intercontinental Championship, and the Tag Team Championships on the line, and that match, man, that's a huge downfall. Oh, and it gets even worse from here. In Your House 4, which was British Bulldog versus Diesel, which got 90,000 pay-per-view buys, which is that's horrible. That's bad. And then Season Beatings. I think this one was kind of like, it was kind of like a down period from that one. But I do remember watching the Wrestling with Regret show over it. It had 3 dark matches, and then it had 6 main event, like six main card matches on top of that, which I remember that was not good at all either for the pay-per-view buys. We have In Your House 6, which was Bret Hart and Diesel. I'm thinking that was a steel cage. It looked like, yeah, steel cage for the WWF Championship. Also Shawn Michaels versus Owen Hart on that show too for the number one contendership for that championship. The infamous Crybaby matches on that show. Taker beats Goldust by countout for the Intercontinental Championship. That is crazy. On that show too. And then it goes into Mania that year. Good Friends, Bitter Enemies, which is Michaels and Diesel. Owen Hart and British Bulldog defeats Ahmed Johnson and Jake Roberts. Okay, that's kind of sick. Shawn Michaels defeats Diesel, which was the main event. That's crazy that Hunter Hearst Helmsley defeats Mark Mara. That was like the fourth dark match on that show, which is crazy. So going into the eighth In Your House event called Beware of Dog, this was taking place on 2 different days. Because due to a severe thunderstorm, the power went out during the broadcast on May 26th, resulting in only 2 matches being shown on pay-per-view in a series of matches where the building had very little power. As a result, a second night titled Beware of Dog 2 was scheduled for May 28th. The 2 matches televised from the May 26th event were shown again at the beginning of the rescheduled pay-per-view, that's crazy. So then... Okay, so we had Smoking Guns versus the Godwins for the Tag Team Championships. Mark Mel versus Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Savio Vega versus Stone Cold Steve Austin with Ted DiBiase, which signals the end of Ted DiBiase's services in the WWF. He will go to WCW and become part of the NWO there. Vader versus Yokozuna, which that doesn't sound right, but alright. Goldust versus Undertaker in a casket match for the Intercontinental Championship, okay. Jake Roberts defeats Justin Bradshaw, JBL, in 30 seconds. Wow, that's crazy. And the main event was Shawn Michaels versus British Bulldog, ended in a no contest. And then the rest of the dark matches was like some of the ones that I just said. Ultimate Warrior defeats Owen Hart, which that's fucking crazy. Man, it's like it's just not looking too good for for old WWF in 95, 96 here. Going into International Incident, which was the 6-man tag between Shawn Michaels, Psycho Sid, and Ahmed Johnson versus Cam Cornette, which is Vader, Owen Hart, and British Bulldog, which actually is an actual really good match. I actually highly recommend that one as a good match to go to. Let's see. So then we have Mind Games up next, which that's an infamous poster there. So that's funny. Savio Vega wrestled 2 times on that broadcast. One was in a called Free for All, and then one was in a or in the main event, like main card, if you want to call it that. Bruce Bulldog and Owen Hart defeats Smoking Guns for the tag team titles, which that's obvious right there. Shawn Michaels defeats Mankind by DQ, which went almost half an hour. That's crazy. Farouk with Sonny defeats Mark Marrow. Psycho Sid defeats Vader, and Jake Roberts defeats Hunter Hearst Helmsley. I think it's like saying like to Vader, like when they brought him over from WCW, it was just like, yeah, we're just gonna not poke fun of you, but kind of just make you like just job out to people. But this pay-per-view, In Your House 10, drew 120,000 pay-per-view buys, which it's still not good. It's still not good. Trying to see here, like however many like pay-per-view buys each one gets, but not a lot of them have that, but that's okay. Main event was Taker and Mankind Buried Alive. That's on the main show. But one of the dark matches, the main event dark match for that show was Shawn Michaels versus Goldust, which actually was a good match too. From what I've heard. The beginnings of Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Hunter Hearst Helmsley in '96, which that's crazy. The Stalker, which was Barry Windham versus Justin Bradshaw. We went 20 minutes. That's freaking crazy. That went 20 minutes. That doesn't sound right either. Then we have In Your House 12. Bret Hart versus Psycho Sid. The Powerbomb versus Sharpshooter. Let's see, go over that. Rocky Maivia defeats Salvatore Sincere, which was Johnny Gunn in WWF. Psycho Sid defeats Bret Hart. Oh yeah, I forgot he was WWF champion. That's crazy. Undertaker defeats the Executioner with Paul Bearer. That was like, I think that was Brian Lee in a mask, I think. Or no, that was Terry Gordy. That's right, that's Terry Gordy. I was like, why did I think about that? Owen Hart and British Bulldog defeats Fake Razor Ramon and Fake Diesel for the tag team championships. That doesn't sound right either. It's like in '96, like they were just like, let's just throw like whoever we can out there. And then we're going into '97, which is kind of started to pick up a little bit with Final Four, which I had said about, which was Hart, Austin, Taker, and Vader. And then Revenge of the Taker, which was the infamous rematch of Austin and Bret Hart via DQ, which that sucks. Taker and Mankind, Jesse James Rockabilly, which happens to be frickin' New Age Outlaws in a few years. Legion of Doom defeat Owen Hart and British Bulldog by DQ. Savio Vega defeats Rocky Maivia by countout, which it's like, man, it's like some of this is just like not really good. Especially, like I said, '97, so it started to pick up just a little bit. So I'm gonna take a break from like talking about the all of the In Your Houses up to that point, but I wanted to kind of like go over like what was some of the prices back then for the original In Your House pay-per-views. So some of them were sold for $19.95 to $24.95 in the mid to late '90s, with prices even often tied to the inclusion of a WWF Championship match. While prices could vary, they remained relatively consistent for the 30 In Your House events between '95 and '99. The standard one in the mid '90s was basically $19.95, but with the championship match increase, like say like for a match that has like WWF Championship match on it, it increased $5 to kind of like be like, hey, like if you want to see this, like you gotta pay a little bit more. Which I mean that's kind of, it's like a smart like little play, but it's like not a lot of people really want to pay like $25 almost for to see an extra match and stuff. And also the prices could also vary slightly by region, although it wasn't really a major factor in the overall price back then either. Important considerations in this too. These prices are from the 1990s and do not reflect in current WWE pay-per-view prices, which are higher and predominantly streamed on like Peacock and from 2026 is ESPN and all that stuff too. One-time purchases, these were one-time period per event purchases and did not require any ongoing subscription or membership, which that's actually kind of good. That was actually kind of good back then. So, with that also being said, in 97, you kind of go into more pay-per-view events that we know now, like Bad Blood. You have No Way Out. You have Unforgiven. You have Over the Edge. You have Fully Loaded. You have Breakdown. You have Judgment Day. Rock Bottom. St. Valentine's Day Main Event, or St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And some of these pay-per-views, quote, being like, No Way Out, Bad Blood, Unforgiven, Over the Edge, Fully Loaded, Judgment Day, those 6 will be in the mainstream pay-per-view calendar for years to come up to that point. And it's kind of cool to see the inception of when it became to be that thing. But then it lay dormant for 21 years, and not a lot of people thought when NXT became this big huge thing, big huge brand. Pandemic happens. 2020. Pandemic happens. Not a lot of people are going outside or anything. So they thought, okay, well, we'll bring back a pay-per-view in your house, NXT Takeover. Boom, bring it together, and it was actually a pretty good show. I actually liked it. And the event marked his 25th anniversary of the first In Your House pay-per-view, and it was also the first In Your House branded event since February 1999, being thus the first In Your House to air on the WWE Network at the time. It was also the first TakeOver event to be held at Full Sail since TakeOver The End in June of 2016. Now keep that in mind. The event had been promoted as the final takeover to be held at Full Sail. However, the COVID-19 pandemic necessitated all NXT events to be held here behind closed doors until NXT events were relocated to the Performance Center in Orlando in October. So, 6 matches were contested at the event, and this was the card of that event. Mia Yim, Shotzi Blackheart, and Tegan Nox versus Candice LeRae, Dakota Kai, and Raquel Gonzalez. Some of these ladies are still there to this day, which is Mia Yim, Candice, and Raquel. And 3 of them are not there anymore, which that's not shocking. Then you have Balor versus Priest, which is actually a really good match too. Keith Lee versus Johnny Gargano for the North American Championship. The Last Chance Backlot Brawl for the NXT Championship, Adam Cole, Bebe versus Velveteen Dream. Karrion Kross versus Tommaso Ciampa. And the main event was Io Shirai versus Charlotte Flair versus Rhea Ripley for the NXT Women's Championship. It was actually a really good show. I actually liked it. And then you go into the next year's, which was 2021. That show was still at the Performance Center. I think that was at the Performance Center that year. And this was 5 matches, and I think I watched this full pay-per-view from top to bottom, and the opening match kind of sold me on it when I first heard it. It was Bronson Reed, who was the North American champion, versus and MSK, which was Nash Carter and Wes Lee, who were the tag team champions, defeating LDF, Legado del Fantasma, which is Santos Escobar, Joaquin Wilde, and Raul Mendoza. 4 of which are still with the company, I think. For the it was winner takes all 6-man tag for the North American and the Tag Team Championships, which was actually a really good kickoff to show. Xia Li versus Mercedes, almost said Mercedes Moné. Wow, Xia Li versus Mercedes Martinez, who are not there anymore. LA Knight, LA Knight versus Cameron Grimes for the vacant $1 million championship in a ladder match. Cameron Grimes is sadly no longer there. LA Knight is still there, which is actually really cool to see how far he's come since then. Raquel Gonzalez defeats Ember Moon to retain the NXT Women's Championship. Miko's still there. And then you have a fatal five-way for the NXT Championship. Karrion Kross, Kyle O'Reilly, Adam Cole, Johnny Gargano, and Pete Dunne. Kross, O'Reilly, Cole are not there anymore. And then Johnny and Pete Dunne are still there, but Pete Dunne is under a mask right now, which that's so stupid. And then the final one was in 2022. No longer NXT Takeover. It was just NXT in your house. And that was the final one in the series. 8 matches were contested on this event, including 2 dark matches were later on Level Up when that was still a thing. So, the D'Angelo family, which is Tony D'Angelo, Cheney Stacks Lorenzo, and Troy 2 Dimes Donovan defeats Legado del Fantasma. Toxic Attraction, Gigi Dolan, and JC Jane defeats Katana Chance and Kidney Carter. Carmelo Hayes defeats Cameron Grimes. Mandy Rose defeats Wendy Chu. Creed Brothers versus Pretty Deadly, and Braun Breaker versus Joe Gacy. Yeah. So I think I would have to watch this one again. But at that time, NXT back then, it was starting to become like, Nickelodeon NXT sort of thing. Do I compare NXT in your house to the, WWF in your house ones? It's night and day. I probably would get more, I guess, if you want to call it, I would probably get more out of the WWF in your houses, more so than the NXT ones. But I do remember watching 2 of them of the NXT in your houses and actually enjoyed both of them. So it's kind of like you gotta take it with a grain of salt. The very first few that were like in 95, 96, going into 97, those were kind of like, if you want to call it, like hit or miss. And plus 95 and 96 was one of the worst periods for WWF at the time. And everybody can probably say that too, even Jim Cornette, because he was there during 95, 96. So like when that big boom period of the Attitude Era, in 97, 98, 99, when that started kind of like ramping it up a little bit, it kind of helped boost ticket sales a little bit. And you could think like Bret Hart, Stone Cold, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Mankind, Undertaker, Psycho Sid. You can name like a lot of people that kind of helped try to get that boom period up there. And like a lot of people wanted to see Austin, Rock, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker. So it's kind of like one of those things where it's like you just don't know what you're gonna get until it's gone forever. I do remember the main event of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in Your House pay-per-view, which was like, it was Vince McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin and Steel Cage, which is like, okay, cool. But that is going to be the end of this best of. I hope you guys have enjoyed this trip down memory lane, I guess, if you want to call it that. If you notice that my voice was kind of like nasally a little bit, it's just because I'm a little bit under the weather, and I'm kind of like stuffed up a little bit, but that's okay. I trucked along and try to make sure I get you this episode out there for you guys. But if you made it to the very end of this video, we do really appreciate it. If you like this type of content, please make sure to follow us on all social media links in the description below, which will take you to our Linktree page, which will take you to our Instagram pages, Twitter pages, the podcast Reddit page, even YouTube channels on there. We are going to try to get the Reckless Paradise vlogging channel hopefully up there sometime soon. I know it's kind of hard for Marissa to do something like that for right now, but maybe in the near future, maybe we can try to get that going. But just keep her in your thoughts and prayers and all that stuff, because she's kind of going through a little something right now. And tonight's song of the night, it is going to be from Avenged Sevenfold, and it is going to be Nightmare. It is going to be Nightmare from Avenged Sevenfold. There is a music video for it. There is a music video for it. And yeah, that is it. And I will see you guys next Thursday. Peace.